right, hello everybody. My name is Mike Espinosa. I am the community manager for GaryCon, which is a lot more fancy sounding title than it actually is. But I am absolutely overjoyed to bring to you an amazing panel as we talk about how to make the table a more welcoming place for everyone. In the Zoom window box, we have Lissa Faden, Kat Smith, and Imogen Gingell. And I'd like to start at with Alyssa and let you guys introduce yourselves.
Sure. So I'm Alyssa Faden. I'm a professional cartographer for the tabletop RPG industry, and I've been role playing since the mid '80s, which is really nicely dating myself at this point.
And then Kat.
I am Kat Smith. I don't show up very many places. I got um r- roped into being Gary Con staff, and I am a Discord moderator on the Gary Con official Discord. But I've been gaming, I guess, table gaming for 20 years, and mostly Dungeons and Dragons, and now a lot of Vampire the Masquerade.
Nice.
And Imogen.
Hi. I'm Imogen. I'm how long have I been in gaming? I guess. Oh no, quick maths. I started doing gaming when sort of in the second edition era of D&D when I was a wee teenager. And I've carried it through as a hobby ever since. And now I kind of split my day job as a space physicist with writing TTRPG supplements, mostly on the DM's Guild, with Eberron supplements, especially across Eberron Adventures and some things with KB Presents, like the team working with Exploring Eberron. And I do the Manifest Zone podcast as well, which explores Eberron campaign setting for D&D and other systems.
Well, fantastic. I guess the first question that I have, and I'll be moderating. By the way, I didn't say how long I've been gaming. I've been gaming since second edition in the early '90s, and that's a lot longer ago than I remember it being. And I've played everything from Vampire the Masquerade to D&D to God, I want to say Robotech at some point. It feels like I've played a little bit of everything. But the first question I have is when, as a DM, and I'm running a game either at a friendly local game store or at a convention, what is something that I can do to make it clear that my table is safe for everyone to be at?
Well, I guess I'll break the ice on this one. I have run a couple of games at conventions, and I've had the good fortune as well from having other GMs actually give me some advice. And one of the first things that I will do, I tend to be a little bit of a Call of Cthulhu nut. I started with Dungeons and Dragons, but nowadays it's a lot of Call of Cthulhu and Cthulhu Invictus. So there's a horror element to mine. So I actually have a good reason right at the beginning of the game to explain that it is a safe environment. I want it to be safe for everyone. And if anyone is uncomfortable with that, then safe environment, they can, want it to be safe to leave the table right now. But I actually do hand everyone a little card that they can, at any point, and I tell them this, just if something happens in the game, whether it be due to another player or what's going on in the game itself, just hold up the card. There's no judgment, and we'll stop the game right there, and we'll correct whatever issue is coming up. If I'm handling something or I'm presenting something in the game that I know, I stay away from subjects that I know are just not going to be con or public friendly. Obviously, I am GMing horror-like elements, but I will. I will outright say that I feel like the game like Cthulhu Invictus, for example, that like is going to feature slavery of some description. I'll outright say this is a game based in ancient Rome, and there may be elements of Roman slaves actually being featured. If you're uncomfortable with that, please just let me know. So I give the players an opportunity to actually be able to silently speak up if something is uncomfortable and set the stage ahead of time, so that they know that their voices will be heard.
Okay, is that the X card
Yep.
system?
Wait, hang on.
Sorry.
Is that the what system?
Is that the X card system, or do you have a special
Yes,
system?
actually, yes. Thank you. It is exactly the X card system.
Okay. Kat, you had something to say?
The other person is here.
Oh. Okay. Oh, we have one more person who will be bringing in just a moment. Once he joins us with video,
Yep.
I will welcome Joe Pitts. But while he's doing that, Kat, did you have something you wanted to add, or maybe Imogen?
I haven't had enough experience with
Hi, Joe.
the whole DMing stuff yet.
All right. All right. Joe, the question that we already have on the table is how we can make the table a friendlier place. Imogen, did you have something maybe that you wanted to add to that?
I think I was going to say one of the things that I think helps is sort of explicit inclusion, especially in game ads and when you're looking for groups to join, is that it really kind of super helpful to see I don't know, notes in your game descriptions and such that kind of foster an atmosphere. And, whether it's saying, we welcome or we welcome queer players or something like that, or, saying that it's a queer or women friendly game. I don't know. It might seem a bit, I don't know, awkward to write that, but nevertheless, I still find it kind of makes me feel better about getting in contact with the people that are putting out those adverts for games and such. So it's about kind of setting expectations early. So you're not going to put a few sessions into a gaming group you think are going to be fun, and then they disappoint you somewhere down the road or something like that. I guess, yeah, so for cons, that means, putting it in your advert. For longer games, it means being really upfront with your communication, I think.
Okay. Joe, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm in total accord with that. I prefer streams that tell you straight up about, where we are, who's coming, and to be mindful that this is a welcoming space for everyone. When I'm running my games, I often tell people if they want to join, or they say like, "Oh, I want to tune in. What's it about? What can I expect?" And I'm like, "Well, there are a lot of people here, a lot of people who don't fit the normal gender binaries." Also, with what I do with my own game and my streams is that my home chronicle that I run is based in my hometown. It was the capital. It's the capital of the state currently, and was the former Confederate capital. So I tell people like this is where we're at, as well as the city itself is majority Black. So a lot of people that people run into in the space are people of color, and I want that to not necessarily be the focus point, but I want to say that other games don't have to fit what people consider to be the default in my game. And what I usually try to play in characters when people invite me into games is that they never tend to be the default. They're always a little bit of extra to show that we're here too, and we like to have fun and play games as well.
Okay.
This brings forth the idea of having people that are neurodiverse on tables then too, because
Yes,
you might have to deal with somebody who is knitting on your table, and if that bothers you, bring it up I don't know, bring it to them. But for the most part, all the times that I've DM'd, it's been like a year and a half since I've DM'd anything. That's why I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm building a game right now. I've told
Ooh,
Joe about it before. It's coming along. I'll talk to you about it later. But
yes, I'm excited.
um, Mike also knows about it too, and I'll talk to the other two ladies here about it. But being aware of people that are in the neurodiverse on your table. I'm on the autistic spectrum. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 36. So,
And it happens. It
and
happens to the rest of us.
yeah, so I will do like the knitting thing will happen because I don't want to pick at my fingers or do other type of stimming to distract from the game. That's where I'm coming from it. But even when I would DM, if I live stream and DM some game sometime in the future, I will have to tell them I will be knitting. It's something I have to do in between the little when the characters are all interacting with each other.
I think that could also work for you, particularly with vampire.
Yeah.
There are vampires that do that, and if a storyteller is really good, they could incorporate that. Not necessarily painting like a target on you, but saying like, this is a quirk that this person has, and this is what they do. It's not a bad thing,
No,
and I think it worked. And I also knitting. I'm jealous because I can't do it, but it's cool.
Now,
I like to knit gifts for people.
I realized I started by jumping to how can we advertise our table being safe, but I don't think I asked the question, what does having a safe environment for gaming mean to you?
Who first?
It's not a small question, I know.
I think it means being confident that it's a space that you know you're going to find sort of, well, I say friends, but even at a sort of a small or a one shot you might do at a con, it's a space where you can be you without having to pack away part of yourself or deal with the kind of tough elements of society that we put up with in our everyday lives, and we can just come and have fun and do games without having to I don't know, worry that someone's gonna make homophobic or transphobic jokes or something like that, and then you just think, oh no, I've wasted my time again.
Well, it's like no matter who you are in life, I think that table moment, that gaming experience, whether it be 4 hours, 8 hours, or whatever it is, we're there to game. We're there to detach from reality for a while, and we need to feel completely at ease, right? To be able to do that. And honestly, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're knitting. It doesn't matter about your race, ethnicity. It doesn't matter about your gender. For me, you should feel absolutely home at that table and completely at ease. And if you're not, then certainly as a GM myself, I'm going to try to move heaven and high water to ensure that you feel at ease. And for the next 4 to 8 hours or so, I can gently drive you insane through a Call of Cthulhu game. But that's me as GM. And I want all of my players I want to see them happy. I want to see them calm. I want to see them enjoying the game. I want to see them immersed in the game. And that requires that nothing about real life can possibly interfere with that in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of that originates with me because I set the tone at the table. And it's on me then to ensure that I am watching the other players. I'm listening to them. I'm listening to their body language. And that there's no possible environment where another player isn't in that calm spot And honestly, that could be as simple as a belligerent player talking over all of the other players, just at the simplest of levels. Because that can, in and of itself, affect other players, sometimes on a very deep level. So that, for me, is what a safe table is, a safe environment. It's that time when you can truly, truly, truly be yourself, like Imogen said, and really let the inner role-playing person come out. That's the only table I'm interested in being at.
That's awesome. It's really cool.
That's something I have actually had to learn to do because there's an experience that people didn't bring it towards me as a DM. I had to realize that happened, and now I really want to change it. So when I finally start DMing again, I can be more mindful of my players' choices in their games. So I will admit to that it has happened to me as
And I think it's okay for it to happen, because the more you GM, particularly in conventions or anything like that, the more that you are going to you're going to GM for a wide diversity of other people. And it is inevitable that there is going to be some point in time when something doesn't go right, even if you don't realize it at the time. And if you learn from that, if you hear that something did not go correctly, and it doesn't matter what it is, and one of the other players or multiple players were adversely affected by that, that to me is a learning opportunity, right? It's okay to mess up in life, and this applies to absolutely anything, as long as you learn and grow. And that applies to GMing as well. And so the more you GM, the more we can grow from that, and the better table we can run, and the safer table we can run. But it does require that learning, and to onboard that and go, damn it, I didn't see that happen. I could have done it this way instead. This is what I would do next time.
Yep.
And bring that in, and bring that into your repertoire.
I always do that with mine after I do. Usually, when I already start the game, I always ask, "Are there any comments or to make, and any issues you have, so we can resolve it before game? And if we can, we'll try to suss it out. And then after the game is over, I always do aftercare. I always ask, how's everyone's feeling? Are you okay? How did this feel? Did you not like this? So I can do better. And I'll often always ask my players, ST feedback. Tell me how I did. Are you uncomfortable? Did I do this? Did I do that? And what I appreciate, which I probably shouldn't have opened the door, is that they've been very honest with me about, and it was like, well, Joe, I didn't like that. And I was like, all right. And I take it down and I make sure I'm like, all right, this is an issue. Let's correct this and go forward with that. And that has been a chef's kiss experience. And so far, and I will admit, because we are human, we will continue, we will make mistakes all the time, and we will grow from that. And as long as you recognize that this was a mistake, and like, all right, let's not do it again or go around that path to reach to that point again.
Yeah. I see there's a question.
Oh,
What
question.
is a good way to change the setting, like as in from the like built-in racism with like in Shadowrun or other D&D games toward orcs? I'm going to answer this because I've changed something. This is in the same game that I talked about, not in the same game, but in the same universe of the game that I had built for a D&D game, the first D&D game that I DM'd. I had everybody treated orcs like they. I was like, what did I have it? I had it set up where the orcs were essentially the world's greatest chefs and bakers in my D&D universe. You couldn't go anywhere without going anywhere without a chef that was an orc, and they had the best food possible. Of course, there's other little like pop-up shops. Like I had tacos in my game, taco stands everywhere.
Tacos are amazing. Sorry.
Yeah, there were taco stands in my D&D universe because I homebrewed it. But I had my orcs set up to be chefs, and they like trying to think of the word that they were tacos. Sorry, I'm reading chat at the same time.
That's okay.
Don't do that to yourself.
So, like, yeah, there's built-in racism. I'm aware of that in D&D and Shadowrun in those games, but I've modified the games that I had run where I was like, tried to, what is the right word? I can't say like negate it because it existed still, but it wasn't as strong.
Did you confront it?
We did confront it. There was an instance I had to play a xenophobic town, and that was the hardest DMing I ever had to do because it just made me feel disgusting. It
Oh,
was
boy.
the grossest feeling I had to do as a DM, and I was like, I don't want to do that again, but I'm glad I did it.
As a,
I Go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
as a big Eberron nerd, huge Eberron nerd, which is why I reached out to Imogen. I know that they've done something similar with Eberron, where they've changed how the races are treated, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure she would
Yeah.
love to speak to that instead of me.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things in kind of solving that issue is you can still kind of, if your players want to, you can still confront issues like racism or colonialism in your games and in your settings.
Yep.
Of course, with the consent of the players.
Yeah.
But when you're writing that into your story, you have to, or your setting, you have to be sort of conscious of the way that's being written. And part of that is, I think you want to center those kinds of stories on the people rather than the kind of the people doing the bad thing. I'm trying to say, like, for example, if you wanted to look at orcs in Eberron, you want to make sure that the story of orcs is written by and for and about orcs and all their strengths and weaknesses, their histories, their legends, and everything. And you don't want to shuffle them off and write about them from the perspective of everyone else. It might seem a bit of a trap to write as a kind of a human-centric, from a human-centric perspective, when sort of the game manuals don't have to be that limited. So you're not writing, the far continents or the distant marches from a colonialist perspective, but from the perspective of the people in those spaces, I suppose. And then you can address, what happens if someone else comes along. But it's important to have those stories too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. Eberron got brought up, so I could wax lyrical for forever about Eberron. But one of the kind of the classic stories there is a region called Kubara, which is a sort of peninsula that sits out to one side of Eberron's sort of main continent across some mountains. And the story there is sort of, well, you could look back in third edition, and the story there was written from the perspective of the sort of the Five Nations, which is the main block. It's written from the perspective of during the war that was happening on that main continent. There were settlers and colonizers moving out to escape the war to settle these lands that they discovered were inhabited by lizard folk. And it took a couple of editions and a few iterations for the real story to be told from the lizard folk perspective. So as the setting stands now, there's this wonderful narrative of all the lizard folk histories and stuff. And I wish that had been told, 15 years ago now as well. But it's really transformed the region, and there's a lot more interest from the fans you see in that region as well, because it's so much more interesting if you know about the people there rather than it's the deep, dark continent with the mysterious lizards, yeah.
I personally, I like that, by the way. I really like that. I really like Cat's idea. I might steal that for myself.
That's fine. You wanna steal some of
Sacrifice.
my ideas? I will give. You can find me on Twitter, and you can DM me, and we can talk about the weird little things I stuck in my first D&D game that I DM'd
Nice.
ever.
I tend to like, how do I do a lot of Shadowrun, by the way. And I don't GM Shadowrun that much. Those years are kind of behind me a little bit. My husband does Shadowrun, but whether it be D&D or Shadowrun or anything else, I take on racism honestly face on. I'll play those characters. I'll play an orc, and I will play a troll, and I will make them the coolest freaking characters ever. So it's a little bit like a cat sort of solution in some respects. I've played a goblin. I've played a minotaur in Dungeons and Dragons because you can. And yeah, so I try to change the narrative almost from a player perspective. I'll take this race and I'll actually put them in the party. It's like, because why
one
not?
of my current player characters. Oh, sorry, Kat, go on.
I like how which tabletop game now has like switched instead of saying race, but now ethnicity. Which one is that? Pathfinder has started doing that, or back ancestry. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the right words. Ancestries. Does anybody remember which tabletop game it is?
I think that is Pathfinder.
Pathfinder. I haven't played enough Pathfinder. I'm sorry.
From the comment section, yes, it's Pathfinder 2 as Ancestry.
Okay, I like that. I'm trying to actually use that more in when I want to start DMing D&D again, or storytelling D&D again. I want to say Ancestry as opposed to.
Well, then I think you can actually then take that as a GM, and if you have a player come to you and say, "Hey, I want to play something with an alternative ancestry here. Can I play an orc or can I play this?" Be open to it. It doesn't matter if it's listed as a valid character class or not. Be open to it because why not?
Actually, Joe, looking at your collection and knowing your vampire background, there's a lot of room for improvement in that space, because it would be really easy for a player to be like, well, my character's 400 years old, so racism is built in. How would you address that in that kind of setting?
Ooh,
that's a good question.
That is a really great question.
I would
considering, because I've with D&D and Pathfinder, that kind of stuff kind of goes over my head because I've only ever played one D&D game, one.
Oh.
So I'm kind of not as abreast with the character racism vibe. I've heard things, but I was not quite connected to it. However, with vampire, I do have a little more experience. I did have a player at one time. He was being honest, he was a slave owner, and he asked me, would that be okay? I said, that's fine, but again, this is modern nights. You have to be mindful of what you're saying. And well, that turned out it didn't work out with him, so that's another topic for another day. But I do have a NPC character who is a Baron, because if you know about vampire, the Iron Hour movement, she is of that time, and oh boy, she's one of the people that I've asked people to sign off on because of how she speaks to people. And when I explain her to people, I always say she's the Karen before it was a Karen. She was Karen before it was a thing. She was a plantation owner's daughter, and she was embraced for her business sense. And she has let that part of herself go, but she speaks to people not in a racial tone, but in a clan tone. Because she's of the one, if you're familiar with vampire, the clan Ventru, the business people, the wealthy people. So she kind of looks down at others would be considered the lower clans, and she makes comments, but she never says like anything racial. And she'll make the phrase, "I'm not this. My friends are XYZ." But with 400-year-old characters, I choose really actually not to run those because they tend to be OP for no reason. And they come with a lot of baggage So I often tell my players, I was like, they can only be so many 100 years old. Anything past, you know,
Yeah.
anything before the beginning of the United States is like, I can't do it because then I would have to do even more research than I would already know to do that. Just a little, make it a little easier for myself.
Okay.
Probably not answer the question, but I tried.
No, you're fine. You're fine. What are some steps in the right direction that the gaming world has made towards towards inclusivity and accessibility in gaming? Praise the game industry. It's not all bad.
I know.
Yeah, it's not
It's a
all
work
bad.
in progress.
It is. I agree with that the most. It's a work in progress. There are. Well, I'll speak about a little bit for Vampire. Um, Vampire has come a long way too. With I'm thinking particularly with two of the clans. They're called Assamites and the Ravnos clan.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Assamites are from the Middle East, and what would happen is they would eat other vampires, and their skin would get black, and that was the curse of just turning black. And then that they have now, I think, changed that around so it doesn't feel like that. And they're no longer called the Assamites; they're called the Banu Hakim. And then the Ravnos clan, content warning, they were considered to be gypsies, and they changed that to them just to being wanderers, to not associate Romani people with Clan Ravnos. And I was like, okay. And apparently in the community that made a bit of a stink because they were like, well, this is how it's always been. And I'm like, just because that's how it's always been doesn't mean it doesn't have room to change. So considering that what happened with Vampire recently with the the release of V5 is that it needed a refresh.
Yes, it
And
did.
now it needed a refresh badly. And I'm glad that they did that. So, and it's now more so not necessarily about the clans, it's about the additions because you have the people that like V5, like me, because it was easier for me to dive into versus the people who did V20, who know all this extra stuff. And that has been something that I thought was pretty interesting. They are trying. I like to tag someone. His name is Lore by Night.
Yes.
Yes, and he is a really, really good person. He has mentioned, I think he's on the autistic scale as well.
Yeah, he is.
He released I want to say it's a Google Drive doc of a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I'm
It's like Wheelchair by Night. I have it
yes,
somewhere.
wheelchair for characters who are disabled. And I was like, and I said, this is so good because it's people who are have a physical disability that's visual are often left out of a lot of tabletop games and other games in general. And there are people who do have actual non-visible disabilities that are often left out as well. And I've often, particularly, I am known for one of my vampire characters who is of the Mulcavian clan, the people who have mental disorders. And I chose to play him not necessarily with a mental disorder because people who tend to use that clan often do it so plainly in your face, like, look, I'm a crazy person.
Yeah.
And it's not for my character, he has a personality disorder. He wears a crown everywhere he goes. He has the ability, he's like, look at me. I want you to look at me, but then don't pay attention to me because I'm afraid. And I was like, I researched the heck out of them and what I wanted to do with them. And I had been tapped by a couple people. Was like, how do you do that and not make? How did you do that without making it? So a fish malk is what they call it in the community. And I said, I listened to people. They do. They call them fish malks.
I know what they are.
Yeah, and like some people don't. But I was like, I didn't want him to be that. I wanted him to have.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Got a combination of
Yes.
VTM and D&D players in here, so.
But yes.
I see.
But yeah,
Yes.
no, Malkavian is actually something that worries me because it does revert to tropes frequently.
That was the word I wanted to use because I tried to not do any tropes with him. I just wanted him to be. He wears like a dinner jacket. He has a crown on. His backstory. He was a former slave, but he was able to buy himself out with freedom, and then he was embraced into a Malkavian clan,
Okay.
and has since accepted modernity. He has a cell phone. He is a TikToker. Like
Nice.
yeah. I, if you ever find my TikTok, he's on there. He likes to do all the little dances and stuff, and that's how he became very popular. And then
Nice.
people were like, "Oh wow, this is a Malkavian." I said, "Yes." I didn't do any tropes with him. I wanted him to be as human as possible with his quirks, and particularly when he uses premonition, he'll because I
Right.
he put his headbuds in, and then he'll just go stiff as a board and just faint wherever he is. And then people were like, "Oh,
You okay? Can I
yeah,
help
yeah." I've had in one game, they were like hovering over me. It was like, "Is he dead? Dead?" And I was like, "No,"
So-
but that's something I wanted to say about that. Sorry, I took up too much time.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh,
You're
no.
good. Are Alyssa or Imogen, what are some successes you've seen in gaming as things get better?
Well, for myself, I mean, I'm actually going to point a finger and sing high praise to Chaosium, who, of course, were behind Call of Cthulhu. I know we're talking about D&D, Vampire the Masquerade. I need to keep waving
Yeah.
the Call of Cthulhu flag a little bit. But, you know, I recently, being a year or so ago, bought Masks of Nyarlathotep. It's a massive, huge campaign. It's been around for decades, and this was a recent rewrite. And you're reading through the intro text as the main keeper, as the GM, so to speak, and I come across a section that says, "Look, this is the 1920s, and in this particular part of the world, it's kind of racist at the time." And so this is how we're actually going to recommend that you deal with it. And they gave advice and tools as a GM, for me, invaluable. I mean, I'm a white woman from England, I need the tools for that type of thing. And the advice that they gave was actually on point. It raised my awareness that, I can't just like jump into this thing as a GM. And it taught me, it gave me the tools to understand the level that I was comfortable with as a GM. And then, when I sat down with the players, I was able to have a conversation, because one of my players was actually playing a African-American Harlem Hellfighter.
Nice.
Kudos to him, because I just got off on the history of that alone. But then it enabled me to go, okay, so guys, girls, just to be aware, this is the 1920s, but this is how I'm going to present it. I'm not going to go full on 1920s because that's just going to be obnoxious. I'm going to dial it back to a 2 right here. And that was honestly all because of Chaosium. So I want to say, I mean, if you look at their early works, I'll almost guarantee, and I don't know this for sure because I don't want to open my box set, but like their first release of Masks of Nyarlathotep, I'd be very surprised if this even came up as a subject. You look at their recent version now, it's right there. They have dedicated several pages to it. So I think that is a success. A work in progress, but a success.
I love that work in progress. It's amazing because it is.
Oh,
Imogen?
I think from sort of the RPG sphere that I've been embedded in, one of the best things I think for D&D content creation has been sort of monetized platforms like the DM's Guild, because what they allow is for fan creators to push into a space that of being able to mutually promote each other, and but allows the fans and the writers putting together these the kind of products you see on that platform to push the boundaries to improve the writing for these things faster than you might see from the larger corporate writers like Wizards of the Coast, for example. So you see people writing adventures which include a page or two about safety tools or content warnings, and including those in product descriptions and everything. So the DMs, I mean, Alyssa was sort of saying similar things, but it's giving the DMs reading these projects the kind of the tools and the links to those tools, including hyperlinks to everywhere across the web, to advice and shortcuts and all these things to make the table a better place to play. So yeah, I guess the the takeaway is pay attention to fan creators as well as the big publishers, because often there's an amount of trailblazing happening in those communities, which is always lovely to see.
Now, Imogen, you brought up something that makes me want to ask a question. What role do you think that sensitivity reading, having a sensitivity reader in the creation process, do you think it is? How do you think that plays into the creation process, and how can we improve that?
I think I'll say on the sensitivity reader thing. I mean, I've never heard from someone say they regret hiring a sensitivity reader. I've always heard people say it's made my writing better. It's a fantastic investment in yourself and your own ideas as well. And it kind of broadens your outlook on the themes that you're writing, and it kind of makes sure you're not tripping over any spaces where you don't have that specialized knowledge. And the kind of the best time to include sensitivity reading in your creative process was yesterday. And today is the second best time, or however that saying goes. But if you ever feel like, you're writing something and you think, I'm not sure, should I get a sensitivity reader for this topic? The answer is almost certainly yes, because you're already thinking about, I don't want to make a mistake here. So absolutely recommended. And start early, I suppose, are the key points there.
I'm going to add on to something, and the thing with Joe, because he brought it up as well. The the Wheelchair by Night. I'm getting this wrong because my brain, I have it downloaded. Lore by Night actually had a bunch of sensitivity readers and sensitivity writers to help him, because of his Discord server is one of the most interesting Discord servers that I've been on, because this is where I have learned to write image descriptions. I'm not very good at it, but write image descriptions, because there's a lot of people, there's a few people on, I don't know how many people there are on that server that are hard of hearing and vision impaired. I might be using, I'm sorry if I'm using the terms wrong. I'm trying to remember everything, but
Okay.
put a call out to, what's her name? Chloe? Chloe helped him a whole lot with writing that. And she's the one that has getting me writing like image descriptions. So when you bring up the idea of having a sensitivity reader on modules that you're writing, can be very useful.
Oh yeah.
So,
I mean, additionally, just adding image descriptions or any sort of accessibility things is a huge help to everybody. In fact, I did an accessibility panel earlier, and it didn't come up, but I mean, they self-advocated, and I think advocacy is important. But Oddball Mage on Twitch asks a great question. I'm gonna read it as best I can. As someone who is more socially awkward and hasn't known many non-straight people, I want everyone to feel safe, but I know I'd get extra awkward because I'd worry about offending someone. Would it be best to try and say something at the start, or just do my best to apologize when I stick my foot in my mouth? I will say that, to paraphrase this question in my own world, when as a straight white man, when I'm asking people to join the inclusivity panel, I kind of felt weird. I'm like, hey, I'm sending you an email because I got to collect them all. and that just made me feel very weird.
Don't know how to answer this. Go ahead.
That is an interesting and a very fair question. Um, I will say this: I'm a gay black man from the states, from the United States. Um, what my experience has been when it comes to the table is that, um, I guess, with being open and honest about about the situation, because there are a lot of people who are socially awkward as well, and that's perfectly fine. But you don't have to, like, if you mess up, you mess up. You own that, and you try to do better. But constantly apologizing for putting your foot in your mouth, as you said, is I don't think it's very, I don't think it's necessary in that context. I think if you ask where people are comfortable with, and where when they set a red line, don't cross it. And if that's the line they don't want to cross, do not push the envelope. Do not ask. Do not go forward. Like earlier before I came in, I apologize for my tardiness. Computer updated, because as computers do. Um, the red card system. I had it when a game I wanted to say with Vancouver by Night. One of the characters mentioned it's a red card, and I was like, oh, okay, that was, and I immediately knew, drop it, switch to something else, and keep the story going. And if you can do it pretty well, people will not even notice that that's happened. Because when I saw that pop up, I was like, all right, let me switch this around so it doesn't look like I'm being mean. My character is being unnecessarily mean. But be honest with your players that you're coming to the table. Tell them that I'm new to this. My experiences are limited, but everyone at the table is welcome, and you are safe here. And if we make mistakes, we will deal with them, and we'll keep going.
I have this like big pit of anxiety in my stomach during this panel because this is my first panel ever, and I'm just like trying to answer to the best of my ability. I'm probably going to start, like, this is the whole accessibility thing. So I'm very close to maybe biting the skin off this. And if somebody asked a question I saw in chat about reading body language, I caught it. I did see that. If you want to read body language, just watch how people are fidgeting, especially with people on the spectrum. They do a lot of stimming. So, like, some of my stimming, I rub my hands in a circular motion on here. I really don't. And sometimes I'll go like this. Another one is I will having right now speaking issues. I'm trying to bring myself down in the middle of this, but this is just me. So paying attention to body language and asking, having your players meet with each other.
Oh, perfect. That's really
yes,
good.
Meeting with each other.
Yes.
In a safe scenario, like not a safe scenario, a safe place, like maybe like you're gonna meet in a coffee shop, spread apart from each other. You do like one-on-one. Well, you don't have to do one-on-ones, but you do like a group meeting, I guess, before you, because if you want to get your players all together at the same time and they don't know each other, it might make for some awkwardness, I guess.
I support that 100%. That is a legitimate thing to say. And I note, that is important, because now you mentioned the body language thing, because I saw it as well. I do that as well. I'm usually very good visually. And it's because of the pandemic, because we're all indoors. So I'm like, I have to be extra focused about what's going on with who. And when I'm looking at my players on the screen, I'm always looking for certain motions, or one of my players does this thing when they're uncomfortable, and then I notice that, and then I quickly see where I'm headed, and I kind of to the other side to not cause them any more discomfort than it already is. And then that's why after the game I always do aftercare. Aftercare is key in after games. I asked, and I give them give me storyteller feedback. What happened? And she was like, well, this happened. And I was like, okay. And I I usually get my tablet knife. All right, noted. I'll do better and keep going. That's awesome, though. Good job, Kat. Thank you for
Thanks.
that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I saw that. I was like, I got to bring this up. So
That was good.
yeah. Are
I will
you? Are you?
I
Yeah.
will say as a DM, it's also okay to screen your players, especially if you're adding a new player to a group, before you do that, before you add them to the
Vetting.
group, to make sure that you feel they'll fit with the others. Because as a
Vetting.
DM, you are protective of your players.
Yep.
Right.
I'm gonna I play in 2 V20 games because that's how I started. I have played some V5 games, not a whole lot, but I have a friend in Indiana who is looking for a V20 game, and I'm gonna have her sit in and listen to both of the games and see which ones she wants to play in, how she would work well with the players. So again, that's the same whole vetting thing. Does this game work for you, or would this game work for you, or do you want to play in one of my V5 games that I'm going to be working on soon? So
Any advice from the other side?
sorry.
Sorry, no, that's fine. I just look at my screen. It's my job as a moderator to go around and talk to everybody.
No, I think the points that have been brought up so far are really important. And it really is just about kind of, I don't know, I think the point about vetting players is a really good one. Because it sounds kind of clinical, but it's really just about finding people who you're
Mesh.
happy to do a social fun activity with, and that's not everyone, and it's okay that it's not everyone. And you wouldn't sort of, I'm trying to think of another activity in a similar space, but it's you're saying like a bad was it bad a bad D&D or a bad RPG is worse than no D&D or no RPG. And yeah, I guess it's just remember it's a game between people and not a game between computer screens or screens like this, if you're sat far away from each other. People aren't there to be actors in a play. People are there to have fun. And if the primary goal is kind of, if you skip that step, then you end up, you don't want to be in a situation where you're treating fellow players at your table like you might colleagues, for example. And we all have colleagues we don't get on as much with others. But there's kind of formal structures in there where you have stuff to do and you get on with it anyway. But the table is not that kind of space. So yeah, remember the players as people first. And even if you make mistakes then, you make mistakes with your friends. It happens. And yeah, if you're approaching the table from that point of view as an atmosphere of a game with friends, then it's harder to go wrong, I think. I think maybe I ended up with a point there somewhere, but
Well, no, but you're raising a really good point. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't even consider vetting, to use a really harsh word, to be optional. It's not optional. You should. We need to remember that this isn't like going to a party and doing some polite socializing with complete strangers. Oh, what lovely weather we're having recently. What do you do for a job? This is so much beyond that. This is hanging out for 4 to 8 hours, or longer if you're hardcore, I guess. And like, honestly, opening up a little bit. If we're gonna role play in front of each other, if we're gonna really get down into the true inner selves, it becomes way more personal, right? And at the end of the day, you have to get along with everyone at the table. You just do. And I think at the very least, if we're talking about like we're beyond conventions at this point, we're beyond obviously sort of running games on a temporary sort of basis. We're talking about potentially inviting someone into your own home. It's certainly someone's home potentially, and your inner circle of very dear friends that you are capable of role playing in front of, then you need to sit down with folks. And I love the idea Kat had of like have them sit in and watch a game and sort of see if it's a good fit or not. But even before then, I personally, we will meet potential players at a restaurant or something. We'll get a bite of to eat, we'll get a drink, and we'll hang out and we'll chill. We'll tell them what type of game we're running and who we are. Let them get to sort of interact with us a little bit. Are we a good fit for them? Are they a good fit for us? And afterwards, the group kind of goes away and says, well, what do you think? Do you think they're a good fit or not? And I think you've got to do something like that. I have done the method when I first moved to Portland of like, you jump into a group. There was something like 10 people at the time. And very, very quick, it was like a meetup thing. I mean, it was like dating for D&D. And we all got together, and it's like, it's random now. It's random if you're even going to get along or not. And like within one session, 2 people dropped out. They just weren't fitting in. Another session later, another person dropped out. And it's like, if once you've got a stable-ish group going on, don't inflict that chance on yourself. Meet up with them first, talk to them, see if you get a good vibe off them or not. Let them have an opportunity to talk and sort of say, hey, I like to knit at the table. Is that a problem or not? No, it's not. By the way, I have a player who knits at a table. I have a player who actually makes full-on freaking armor at the table from time to time with little rings of metal. And it's like, you know what? That's his shtick. I know he's not listening to me as a GM. That's his thing, and it's cool. And so it gives that person an opportunity to even bring this up. Hey, is it okay if I, knit at the table or something like that? No problem, man. It's all good. So it's like you can even get onto a nice level playing field together before you even sit down, as friends at the gaming table.
Excellent points.
One of the things that's been brought. I'm sorry, Joe. Did you want to add?
No, I'm just saying to listen out. Excellent points.
One of the things I see brought up in chat that's being talked about is a lot of people are discussing a session 0. What are some must-haves in a session 0 or in a pre-planning? I guess we should define a session 0 as a session before you start a campaign or you start an adventure, so that you lay out the rules as the person running the game, and the players can lay out their boundaries as people who are partaking in the game. What are some things that you feel are important to include that are often overlooked? And I think, Kat, you had something you wanted to add.
I played in Virtual HorrorCon this year, and they had sent out all the storytellers, DMs, whoever, sent out a PDF with what is the agreement called? It's like you said it's like these are the boundaries that you can't cross. What's it called?
The consent forms.
Yeah, it's a consent form, and that was the first time I've ever filled out a consent form for anything. And I was like, this is a really good idea. So for session 0, if it's all new players and they don't know each other, you don't know them very well, do a consent form. And like, if it's like, that was the idea that I like popped in my head. I was like, this is a really good idea.
I love those. When I started my campaign, story, I had sent them out. I was like, please fill these out, please, so I can know where not to go. And then usually, because now I don't have a lot of space anymore because I have so many vampire books, so you can see back there, and other stuff. I'm like, I have to do it on my tablet. So I'm just like, shoo. I'm like, so I can have a quick check before we even get started. Before I start the next game, I'm like, all right, this is, they have the green, the yellow, the red, traffic light colors. So I was like, all right, this is a no-go. So we know not to do these things. And I know this is a boundary for someone or for these groups. So I'm not going to go there. Having a session 0 just in general is important. because again, you get to, I hate using certain words because they sound very ugly, but you get to,
Is there another word?
It's okay. You can use
there
them.
is a, you weed out the the factors that are not going to work, and with that you get to say you as what you were saying, Alyssa, is that some people you run it, have people sit around, then you kind of, if they leave, wish them the best, keep going. Another person leaves, keep going, and then you say, all right, this is my home, so to speak. You have to respect the rules here and the rules of the guests. And that is something that I've done with my stories. But the consent form has been absolutely helpful because it puts it all in black and white, and everyone has a different stop button, so you can automatically know when and what not to do. I think I twisted that around, but the point.
I think one of the sort of one of my favorite formulations of that kind of consent form idea was something, I can't remember where the source is, I'm sorry, but it was splitting that up into something called lines and veils. So you give all of your players, this form where it says, what are your lines and what are your veils? And the veils would be the themes, the tropes, the various elements of whatever game content would be the things that you're happy to have occur, but that they should probably fade to black. For a lot of people, that's things like violence. They don't want a gory game, but if you're playing D&D, you might still have combat. But the other one is lines, where this is my line, do not cross it. So you can have that kind of gradated layer to it, where you can say, I'm happy for things to happen, but I don't want to face them head on, if you know what I mean.
Lines and Veils is a safety tool set from the Golden Lasso games.
Yes, thank you for that.
I didn't even realize it, but I did. I did. I'm going to call it a questionnaire because it was more of a questionnaire back in the day for me. But I didn't realize that it actually was exactly what we're talking about here. And the GM handed it to me, and it basically, it defined everything that he wanted to get out of the game. But it was providing instructions and parameters for what type of game that he was going to be running. And he was pretty clear. It was the first time that a GM had ever sort of said to me that we're all heroes on the same side, so no one's playing an evil character. And it gave like this framework, and I understood. It's like, you're all going to be family members together. We're all going to be working together. And I'm like, it as a player, it really helped me. And it was the first time a GM had ever done it. And I was like, okay. And it was my opportunity as well. Like, I mean, if there was something that was like being presented to go, this is maybe not a good fit. And I love that. I do the session zeros all of the time now, but I've never had to honestly start a whole new group. And I think if I did, I would do exactly what the panel is suggesting here. I love it.
Okay. I'm actually in the chat for the Twitch. I'm going to be linking some information from an earlier panel by Jennifer Kretschmer. It was about accessibility with people who have various disabilities. And one of the things they pointed out is that almost everybody has some sort of disability. If you wear glasses, you're using an accessibility tool. I will tell you that as somebody who has lived with ADHD their whole life, I'm giving a great deal of focus and holding still, but that's redlining my energy very fast in life. Like, it takes a lot for me to hold still. So yeah, but session zeros are very important, and I just distracted myself in my own head. Vetchel, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Vetchel Fantasy, said that when they professionally DM games, they tend to run them very flat as a means of not wanting to step on toes or offend anybody. And I can see how many people would go that route but I also believe there's a beauty in celebrating the diversity and letting people letting people really play up who they are, or their culture, or their character, whether it's who you are as how you identify as an individual, or who you are based on where you come from. How do you think we can safely let people do that without stepping on toes, as it were?
I think from my perspective, I would always prefer to play at a table where a game master or a player um, tries some representation, and maybe they make a stumble or two, rather than, so long as they're willing to learn and discuss and improve and so on. I would rather that than be at a table which doesn't address, doesn't strive for representation and so on. So I guess part of it is kind of, I don't know, if you're approaching it in good faith, mistakes aren't the end of the world. They're a learning opportunity, and you'll come out better for it. And I can't speak for everyone, but certainly from my own perspective, it's not a deal breaker to try and fail. Otherwise, how would anyone get better if we weren't allowing that? So yeah. Yeah, that's the alternative is very boring. So.
Right now, you're 100% right. And you actually used the word I didn't want to use, but you're right. It's potentially boring. I mean, if you do what we've been talking about here, where you set up a safe place, you're watching your table, you're watching the body language, you do what Joe suggested, 40 minutes ago or so, where it's like, okay, so how did I do? And you can even do that via email or something, so people feel like they can open up. And then we also mentioned learn from it. Be open as a GM to learn and to grow. And I think as long as you're compassionate and empathic, you're gonna understand the where you need to throttle back a little bit. I don't need to go full on Hills of Eyes horror into my description level here to get the point across of a particular scene. I can throttle it back a little bit. But if you've done your session 0, if you've done your, you've sat down and even potentially had a little questionnaire with players about what type of game they want to have, and do they have any sort of disabilities or anxieties, etc. And as long as you're open and you onboard all of that, and then you're running your games, and you see, Kat over there is actually, you see that maybe she's beginning to rub her palm, she's getting a little bit, you could even be after the session, email her, sit down, have a Zoom or whatever, talk it through. Maybe Kat sort of says, well, that scene where you would describe, it kind of was getting a little bit too graphic. As a GM, don't sit there and go, well, too bad, because I'm really cool, Cthulhu. No, wrong reaction. Just be open to it. Say, Kat, thanks so much for bringing this to my attention. I really appreciate that. You onboard it, you bring it forward into your next game, you can throttle that back. But there may be other areas where you can go full on 11, on the scale, 11 out of 10, on something else, and all of the players are having an absolute bit more with it. I would not, though, dial everything down to a 2, just to be sure, because that's almost like. I get that. I get that reaction. I truly do. But it's like, that's the whole point of sitting down with players at the sessions. That's the whole point of setting up your game. That's the whole point of meeting people ahead of bringing them into a group. It's so you can learn what they want to get out of a game, out of a group. Do we have any limits here? I think I've got this dot of light on me that's driving me nuts. What are we? If you go through all of these preliminary steps, you're going to start to feel comfortable in areas that you can then start to play in. I mean, I'll be right out. I'm gonna use my Mask of Nyarlathotep, and I'm just gonna play in my head right now that I've got Joe sitting at the table, and I know that we're about to play in freaking 1920s America. Well, you know what I'm not going to do? Full on 1920s America, because it's going to offend the living crap out of Joe. I mean, and I'm probably going to have a conversation with him up front. So I think there are some obvious things that you can do, and all of the steps that we have been talking about here, to at least let yourself off the leash a little bit here, and then just be constantly open to feedback from players and seek feedback from players, because sometimes they're not going to give it to you willingly. You've got to go and ask, just like Joe was talking about.
I love that. That's perfect.
I think you and I, Joe, are going to get along. We need to find each other in the social sphere somehow.
That's perfectly fine. I'm available in all places. That's all of that. I don't even know how to even I can jump on that, because that was perfect. That was perfect, because
I want to play in a Call of Cthulhu game with you now.
I have never played, and I've been asked to, but it never, time never set itself up so I could play it, because I was always confused about how it would actually work. And I've only ever done Vampire, and I've done D&D, and I have not tapped the other role-playing games yet. Also, I could also say with that, for the DM, GM, ST diagram is also what Alyssa says. Just, you don't have to do it at a 2. Just, talk with your players, make sure that they are comfortable where we're going. And as you said, also, it's like, if it's 1920s, it's 1920s. But you don't have to go full into the 1920s in the United States, because, oh my God, it was awful. And the 20s was not a good time for anyone in the United States. Historically, I'm just going off what I remember, because it was not a good time. But those issues do exist, and be mindful of that. Don't go into it not at least abreast of something. Just going full into it, and then just people are like, oh, okay, I'm getting off this train, and you're not sure why. But also, I do that when people have issues. I say, text me, email me, or call, and we can talk about it. And I've had, particularly with one of my players, we've had several hours of talking, because she was like, I like this, and I love this, and I hated you when that happened. And I was like, okay, hate's a very strong word. Tell me what I could do. And she was like, well, this. And I was like, all right. And we worked on it. And so far, so good. So yeah, enjoy your table. Also remember, as it's been said, you're there to have fun. This is supposed to be fun for everybody involved, including you, who is telling the story or DMing or GM. Have fun. Make sure your players are heard. Make sure they're having fun, and make sure everything is accessible for people, so they can all be included in the table. And it's not just like a brand. Like, this is an actual thing that everybody can be included.
I think there were ways too. I'm going to use the racism one, because we were talking about 1920s. It does. We all know the trope of the player that does something, says, well, that's just too bad because I'm just playing my character. And it's like, well, yeah, strictly speaking, you are. But you've taken a path with this character that's now just being plain disruptive to everyone else. And there are ways of playing your character that isn't disruptive, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as a GM, the same rule applies. I could sit there with Joe in my game and like launch into a diatribe of racial slurs and say, oh, it's just the NPC. I've just ignored everything else we've been talking about for the last hour, so bad me. But also, that's not empathic, that's not compassionate. That there are other ways of doing it. I could sit there and go, he looks at you, snarls, and launches into a volcano eruption of racial slurs. And I've not actually uttered one of them. Mm-hmm. Joe gets it. He's got it going on in his head, but I haven't had to go there. I haven't had to actually like pull it right on the table. So, and you could do that almost with any subject in a game. If you want to describe some horror, you can describe horror. But again, you don't have to go do some kind of like violence porn description on your players. You know, you just don't need to do that. You can just simply say, this is one of the worst, bloodiest sights that you have ever witnessed in your life. Give me a sample, you know?
That brings up that point about, I told you about that character I have in my game who was the Karen before it was Karen's. Her name is Myra, and I say that she's not racist, she's clanist. And she will look down at the other, what she calls the lesser people, because they're not her. And she doesn't say anything ever racial. It's just that she says, well, you know, you're and your kind, just, you know, we don't really mesh well. The Ventru and gang girls, it just doesn't seem to make any bit of sense. And the way that I have portrayed her as this, I guess, for a worldwide audience, that genteel Southern white woman belle of the antebellum South with the big skirts and her house having a name, very Gone with the Wind, but she is so removed from that because she's now in the modern nights, and that's how she still speaks, but she never utters anything ugly. But my players after the game, they quote from one of my players, I really don't like that bitch, end quote, because of how the body language I do is with her. She's very kind of poised, and when she considers you lower, I do subtle things. She kind of looks down at you and just, sure. And I find out that my players absolutely abhor her because of how she speaks to people. And the accent just really messes them up too, because they're like, ugh. This is the dregs of the southern part of the United States. And she is the epitome of that. But yes, that was a good one.
May I would love to compliment you on something that it appears that your character has actually modeled the growth that we would like to see in people, that over her time she has realized what is not okay to say, and though she appears to have not forgotten or denied her past. She appears to have learned how to grow, and it may not be perfect, but is at least modeling improvement.
When I wrote her specifically, and everybody that has seen her come on stream, they've also noticed is that because of when she was alive and then she died, she still had that. She had to watch the world evolve around her. And at some points in the story that they're putting upload on YouTube now as we're speaking, she made a comment about, well, you know, at one time we had that awful war with Lincoln, and it just completely changed the way the world was. And now I have to deal with all of this new nonsense. And she did have to adapt. Also, with the city currently setting, it's majority Black city. So she has to see Black people around her all times, and they're not in the roles for when she was around. And she has accepted that, because she also has in her backstory, she has this weird story because stay tuned if you ever want to find out. But she was considered low class for who she chose to partner herself around with. I'll just say that. And let that sit.
Well, I do think it's important, though, to model the behaviors that we would like to see our players exhibit. And I would love to talk more about that, but we have to respect our panelists' time, and so I want to bring this down for landing. And I'd like for you all to tell people if you have anything else that you'd like to add that we didn't get to, and tell the viewers where they can find you if they would like to continue the conversation. You want to start with Alyssa, where we started at the beginning?
Sure. So, I'll just tell you where you can actually find me, to Alyssa Phaeton on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok. Don't go there. So just Alyssa Phaeton, alyssaphaeton.com. It has all my social media links on there. Find me, and you're going to find that I keep all of the hate of the world out of everything that I talk about. I just try to talk all about the positive things, the fun things, and I love to lavish in with buckets of history and old photos. And I would love to hang out. And on that note, I do want to say that this is an incredible hobby that we're in. And I don't care what version of a game you're playing or what game you're playing, or if it's homebrew or not, or if it's something that a friend came up with in the last 5 minutes. If you're sitting down at a table with friends having an incredible time, you're my type of people, period. And I hope that you go forth, you play on, and that you try to ensure that the gaming table that you're at, whether you're a player or a GM, is one of the safest places and the most comfortable places that a human being can be at. Because to be honest with you, the world out there is horrible. I was going to use some profanity, so you can probably imagine. It's not a nice place. And the table is our refuge. And it's been my refuge for decades now. It's a place where we don't think about bills. We don't think about politics. We're not thinking about the horrors and the hate that's going on in the world right now. It's a place where we escape. And I would hope that this panel has helped you a little bit with some ideas as a GM or a player with how you can help facilitate that a little bit, whether it be for you or the players around you, or maybe a new player. And I wish you the very best in gaming, and I love you for it.
All right, and then Kat, would you like to go ahead and tell people anything you have to say and where they can find you?
I can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok if you feel like it, as Dead and Glow. And you see me type, and that is how you spell my name, but I'll put it on there. And I post a lot about random stuff and a lot of game, particularly Vampire the Masquerade stuff now. I do talk a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons, but you can find some of my knitting stuff on there too, so.
All right, and then Imogen?
You can find me, where would be the best place? So my Twitter is ILGingel. That's GINGELL, if you want to know how to spell my surname. I've also got a website at imogen.space, which has a list of all the things I've written on it. So yeah, feel free to follow me or message me on Twitter. It's always great to meet you people and make games together.
And then Joe?
All right, it's my turn. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Pitts, better known as DJ Toreador. My Twitter handle is NOLA, NOLA _Fanger, FANGER, like Fangbanger from True Blood, which is where it comes from. I run an Anarch-based Vampire the Masquerade V5 Edition Chronicle, homebrewed by myself, with some of my friends in my hometown of Montgomery, Alabama. That page that's our Twitter page is River Region STU. If you want to follow around, find out some of the characters that are there. Pictures of some of the people that I mentioned, particularly Myra. The Instagram is River Region Studios on Instagram. I'm also, my personal Instagram is Joe_Schmo88. I post selfies, random vampire stuff, food, which is not popular anymore like it used to be.
Selfies.
What else? Yeah, vampire stuff, cool selfies, talk about other things that are impacting the world, not necessarily bad things, but I live in the United States, and this is currently one of the most politically hot times in the country since the civil rights movement. So there are instances of that, talking about that in this country and what's impacting American citizens and the world. That sounds really, really overboard, but I'm just saying. But hey, I'm on Twitter. That's where you can find me the most. Other people have said to find my Facebook. I'm not giving that one out, but if you find me on Facebook, add me, because a lot of people found me and added me, so I'm tickled by that. I love everybody on this panel. I love what I'm being invited here. Thank you guys for having me. And if you guys have questions about Vampire the Masquerade or making characters or how to do a session 0, whatever you're comfortable asking, or even telling me, because some people actually come out to me all of a sudden. So I tend to draw that, so that's cool. But yeah, add me. I'm there.
All right. And as I said before, I'm Mike Espinosa. Nobody's ever actually looking to talk to me. Most people are looking to talk to Gary Con, and you can find me through all the Gary Con stuff. I would also like to let everyone who's watching this know that this video will actually be downloaded from Twitch and then re-uploaded to the GaryCon YouTube page. And I believe Alyssa's going to put it on her YouTube as well. And you can look for the information there. If you actually do want to talk to me, I'm at Mr_Espinos, ESPINOS, on Twitter. And I'm very bad at Twitter, but that's mostly because it just gives me anxiety. So, and thank you all. Thank you to my panelists. You guys were amazing. The next best rule in gaming is kindness is the best rule after cool. And then I just want everybody to have a great day. And the more we game, the more friends we make. So thank you and have a good one.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Don't
Bye-bye.
get lost in the night.